Hi, this is Ariel from Kinokuniya Bookstores. We're speaking today with author Erica Friedman. Erica Friedman is the founder of Yuricon and has run the world's oldest and most comprehensive blog on Yuri, Okazu, since 2002. She has edited manga for JManga, Seas and Udon Entertainment. Most recently, Riyoko Ikeda's epic historical classic, The Rose of Versailles. Hello, Erica. How are you today?
How are you today? Thanks so very much for having me.
Good, I'm good. I'm glad to do this. Your new book, By Your Side, is the book for anybody? The First 100 Years of Yuri Anime and Manga, published by Journey Press, is, as far as I can tell, the only book-length exploration of the Yuri genre in English. It's a dense and informative book with a parallel global resurgence and interest in anime and manga and LGBT issues. This book manages to be especially relevant to them. I'm glad this book exists.
Thank you very much. I am also very glad this book exists.
Yeah. First, can you tell us a little about yourself and your interests in manga / anime, and more specifically your interests in the Yuri genre?
Sure, thank you. So I am a professional researcher by trade. So when I, like so many other people, encountered Sailor Moon, I immediately did some research, and I found out that there was a couple. Two of the Senshi are an established couple. And I decided to do some research, and I found Haruka Michiru, and Sailor Moon opened up into a giant hole into which all my time and money and effort went into. Of course, Cartoon Network eventually did bring over that season, and we got, instead of Haruka Michiru, the Queens of Yuri, we got Amara and Michelle, the incestuous cousins. So as it has for a lot of people, Sailor Moon basically launched me into 20 years of reading, watching, writing, and thinking about Yuri.
Yeah. That sounds like a very common story. Like that almost parallels my own story with just anime, actually,
Right,
just
sure.
in general. But
I will say though that I did watch anime when I was a very small child. There was a Speed Racer, and in the 80s I was watching Star Blazers with friends when it was Japanimation. We didn't call it anime back then, but I could see at the time that it was a hole that was going to take away all my time and money and effort, and so I didn't engage, but Sailor Moon caught me and has never let go.
Yeah. Could you give us a definition of Yuri, and is there any difference between Yuri in manga and Yuri in anime?
Okay, great. In the Yuricon communities that I run, we use a very broad definition. It's a very large umbrella. Yuri can describe any manga, anime, or related media like fanfic and fan art, movies, games, that shows an intense emotional connection between women, romantic love, or physical desire between women, or just having a lesbian character, or a queer character, queer female identified character. The key here is that Yuri is not a genre that is defined by the age or gender of the reader, like the other demographic genres, but by the perception of the reader. And we don't gatekeep in Yuri. And a lot of the other genres will gatekeep about what is real, whatever. We don't do that. If you feel that something was Yuri, if you resonate to that couple as a Yuri couple, rock it on. It's good. It's good. As for the second part of the question, it's probably easier to discuss Yuri as a genre in terms of the way it developed. As your audience probably knows, manga is organized into 4 demographic genres. So you have for boys, for girls, for men, for women. And each one of those, Yuri sort of developed as a feature within that, with its own tropes. So that there's, I don't know, girls at a boarding school, for instance, is, say, a classic shoujo trope of Yuri. And so while Yuri is existing in all the other tropes, and it has been its own genre for so many years, basically what you have is not so much difference between anime and manga, but Yuri for boys, Yuri for girls, Yuri for men, Yuri for women. Yuri created for different audiences by different people who have different feel. Right. So for instance, a Yuri created by an adult man for an audience of adult men will feel different than Yuri created by a woman for a girl's audience.
Right.
So I think that's more where the differences apply.
That's pretty interesting. What I've always found fascinating regarding anime and manga is how remarkably LGBT friendly the whole subject is. Long before there was a mainstream interest in stories involving same-sex couples in this country, this was a commonplace in manga and anime. Could you unpack some of the reasons why anime slash manga is generally, not always, but generally LGBT friendly?
So I want to be very clear that what I'm going to say now is my opinion, because I'm not speaking from expertise here, but more or less from experience, right? So I believe that anime, and even more specifically manga, it has a number of functions. It serves to entertain, serves to educate, and it serves to be a fantasy space in which people can express things that maybe they can't talk about over the kitchen table with their family. So it's a place for you to give your true story or your real feelings, or maybe explore feelings that you didn't know you had in a fictional sense. A great example of this is Kabi Nagata's My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. She created this comic essay about her struggle with depression and an eating disorder, and she put it on Pixiv. And so many people resonated to this in Japan and then overseas that it was licensed initially by a small press, and then her series continued and was licensed by a much larger press in Japan and overseas publishers. As a result of her success, however, she finally had to have that conversation over the kitchen table.
Actually, that series is like insanely popular.
Insanely popular, and it's really just pieces of her story.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the whole story, but it's her being really honest in a way that maybe if she had not been on Pixiv, she would have ever had a chance to be.
Right.
So I think that's why you're seeing LGBTQ folks using internet, using anime manga, specifically manga, to tell their stories in a way that they wouldn't have had the chance to otherwise tell those stories.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there, and this is sort of a question related to the last one, but are there any cultural or historical conditions unique to Japan that makes the country more open to something like Yuri? I mean, it's just fascinating that I don't think there's anything, or I can't think of an equivalent in the States that's sort of homegrown and allows for this kind of, like what you find in Yuri, it's just...
Well, I do want to say that there's a lot of gay comics and queer comics, lesbian comics in the West, and that's something that has been around for many decades. So when I'm asked questions like this, I want to stop people and say, there actually is homegrown gay comics, queer comics. There has been for many, many years here, and since the late 60s, we've had gay comics and we've had queer comics. They are mostly independent comics. For a long time, they were small, very, very small press. We don't have comic shows the way they have comic shows, where individual creators can come, but we do now. We have things like the Small Press Expo, MoCA here in the city, which is a terrific show. And so we do have something exactly the same and have had for as long. But on the one hand, manga culture is just part of Japanese life, or has been. And I want to say that because manga culture, as it's understood, was really rooted in post-war Japan, and things have changed so radically with the internet. While manga is easier to find and more common, people's attention spans aren't as long. People are reading a lot more on the phone. They're reading people they know from Twitter and from Pixiv. So it's both more common and also more fractured. But really, the proliferation of the internet is the thing that has really allowed queer creators to get their work out. Because before then, we had mainstream magazines. I don't want to say they were blocking anything, but they were certainly open to what they felt would sell.
Right.
And so it's not until something is proven saleable that they're going to want to buy it. So in 2003, the first Yuri Manga magazine began. It was called Yuri Shiman, and it closed up the next year. In 2005, it re-began as Yuri Hime.
Yeah.
Since 2011, Yuri Hime has been monthly. And the fact that there is a monthly Yuri Manga magazine, plus other quarterlies, including a crowdfunded quarterly called Galette, which is creator-owned and really fantastic, gives new writers a place to put their work in a mainstream magazine.
Right.
But they don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
They have the internet. And so I think that's really a key thing. So you're getting now, for the first time, queer work like Our Dreams at Dusk, Shimanami Tasagare, by Gender X creator, about the LGBTQ plus community in Japan, or My Brother's Husband, by an out gay creator, for a mainstream adult male audience. So we're getting to finally see queer work, by queer creators in the industry, as well as all of the people working on the internet in their small groups and circles and doujinshi and all the things we always have.
Yeah, that's great. Could you give us a brief account of how the Yuri genre was introduced to an American audience, and how was the genre initially received?
So Yuri arrived along with the internet.
Right.
In the 1990s, and I actually write about this in my book, that to some extent fans on the internet created Yuri and BL, and not created, I don't want to say like they created it, but they gave it the environment in which it could thrive. So Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z were used as the lead anime in the afternoon on Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
And people from all over for the first time could get on Usenet and have conversations with other people about this cool thing that they were watching, whereas before, fandom was local. You'd have local events, maybe a local club, your zines. Now you had the globe, right? And you could talk to people from everywhere. So those of us who liked same-sex relationships in anime and manga were able to find other people online from wherever, and we could talk about it. And so what we now call boys' love was just really starting to get going at that time. And there were some of us that liked relationships with women. And what I did was I created a mailing list so we could talk uninterrupted. Because at the time on Usenet, you'd start talking about something, and then somebody would say, whatever, or they would just be like, oh, that thing isn't what you think it is. You can't help fans. And we're all like that still, and I know that. So I created a mailing list, and I gave us a place to talk about Yuri. And that was pretty much the first home for Yuri on the internet. And in 2003, I ran the first 3-day convention just about Yuri called Yuricon, and we did 3 more events in 2005 and 2 events in 2007. And since then, we've had this on whatever the leading popular platforms are at the time, and we move and shift as the platforms change. And so there's always someone to talk to about Yuri somewhere.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I'm going to have to start calling you OG Yuri Queen or something like that.
We could add it to my list of jokey titles. I've been the Yuri Joe. I've been the Yuri Master. my favorite mangaka called me the Yuri Master, so that's the one.
Okay, that's good. I remember in the early 2000s, hanging out with a lot of like my guy peer group, and they would all watch Dragon Ball Z, and I would try to get them to like watch Gravitation and Sailor Moon, and I love they're both good anime.
Everything's good. Everything has its audience.
Yeah, that's true. Yuri's one subgenre amongst a whole host of subgenres within anime and manga, right? So, what are the most common subgenres Yuri crosses over with, and what do you think are the most interesting kind of crossovers?
Okay, so I would start with that Yuri is a feature of all the demographic genres. They all started on its own. Not so much a subgenre, but it was a feature. You would see different kinds of Yuri and different kinds of demographic genres. Mm-hmm. Since 2010, it's actually been a genre of its own. You can find it on bookshelves here, and you can find it in Japan. So we'll call it a genre of its own. And so I wouldn't call them crossovers so much because Yuri is native to those other forms as well. But Yuri does have some subgenres of its own, in fact. The most popular one right now is called Shakaijin Yuri, and that is women with jobs and lives and work, that have relationships and friends and family and workplace. And one of my favorite examples of that right now that's really hot is She Loves to Cook, She Loves to Eat for the Empress. It's a terrific series about 2 women who just bond over food, and it's really fantastic. Another place where you can find Yuri intersecting with other genres is isekai and science fiction. For science fiction, again, you mentioned Gundam, so The Witch from Mercury is a really terrific thing. Gundam, The Witch from Mercury, actually stands on the shoulders of a shoujo classic, Revolution Girl Utena.
Yep. Watch both, but especially watch Utena.
Watch Utena first, so that you recognize what's going on in Gundam.
Yeah.
But also a really good example of a mix-up of isekai and science fiction is the magical revolution of the reincarnated princess and the genius young lady, also out from Yen Press, and it's a manga and a light novel. My favorite thing, and we don't quite have enough of it, and rein me in if I start going on too long here, is sports Yuri. And everyone who's a friend of mine or a fan will start laughing. We haven't gotten a lot of sports Yuri, and I really think it's a giant lack in the crossover thing. But we did get last season Birdie Wing from Crunchyroll. It's streaming on Crunchyroll for free. It is about underground mafia golf, and it is completely out of whack. And I highly recommend it. We're getting a second season next spring. And if you like Yuri and you like sports, and you like underground mafia craziness, it's the thing for you.
You heard it here first. You need you need a Yuri Haikyuu and Birdie Wing. Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite Yuri manga and anime? And if so, what are they? And a related question: what do Yuri anime and manga do you consider a classic? Like, which do you consider a classic that every fan worth their salt should know about?
Yikes, the dreaded favorite question. So I don't actually do favorites,
right,
because I'm always excited about reading something new or watching something new. But I will say that I have very soft places in my heart for Sailor Moon and Revolutionary Girl Utena, which were so foundational for Yuri. And also are currently out in anime and manga form. So you can get Revolutionary Girl Utena from Viz Media and Sailor Moon manga from Kodansha and the anime from Viz Media as well, I believe. But the second part is really complicated too. I'm always hesitant to recommend things because I feel like I know what I like and I don't necessarily know what anyone else likes. I do write on Okazu, my blog. I write at the end of the year top 10 lists every year, which is not so much anything but my opinion of what the cool, notable things of that year is. So if you're wondering what I liked 3 years ago, you can go check out the top 10 list. But I'm going to say, after much intense thought in my home and discussion, I'm going to say The Rose of Versailles.
Okay, yeah, classic.
Not just because I edited it, although that does sound a bit wonky, but it's out now from English. The anime is out from Discotheque, and the entire manga series is out from Udon Entertainment. And not because it's Yuri, although it does have some Yuri in it, but because it's a foundational classic of shoujo manga by a master of the form. Reading The Rose of Versailles is going to give you historical information that's 100% historical until it's not. It's going to give you your RDA of high epic fantasy, also melodrama, so many tears. And really, most importantly, because Oscar Francois de Jarget is the epitome of one of the key tropes of Yuri, which is the girl prince. Mm-hmm. And so much of Yuri anime and manga that came after The Rose of Versailles really leaned on the concepts and the images that was established there. So I'm going to say The Rose of Versailles.
Yeah, definitely. Matter of fact, the director of Utena, Kuniko Ikuhara, he actually said in an interview, he's like, actually, Rose of Versailles, Utena wouldn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And Your Brother, also by Ikeda. Ikeda Sensei has written some really, really key series. You would not have Jury from Utena if it weren't for Miya-sama in Oni-sama Dear Brother, which is also out from Discotheque.
So that's a good choice.
Thank you.
Are you excited about any current anime and manga in regards to your...
So much. I am so excited about so much. There's so much coming. One of my favorite series of the last 5 years is called I'm in Love with the Villains. It is a manga series. It's a light novel series that's been adapted into a manga series, both of which are out from 7 Seas. And also maybe getting an anime next year, and we're really fingers crossed on that because it's really, really fantastic. It is isekai. It is high fantasy until it is science fiction and incredibly intense. It's openly queer all the way throughout, and really, really an outstanding series. So that one's really fantastic. I mentioned it before, but She Loves to Cook, She Loves to Eat, which is from the Impress. It's getting a live action series next year in Japan. On the Japanese side, I'm reading Hana Monogatari, which is a story about two senior women. And so what happens after you're moving on in life, your family's gone, your husband's gone, what do you do when you're picking up your life and trying to rebuild it? And it's about two women who bond over things like makeup and buying nice clothes and going out and learning the world. And it's outstanding. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to, once again, my refrain of the internet. There's a whole host of young creators who are doing crowdfunded online work. And last year I crowdfunded something called Boyish Squared, Butch Yuri Anthology. And it was an independent work by a group of creators who did their own work. And it is available in English online and in Japanese online. So there's a lot to look forward to. There's a lot really great stuff out there.
Yeah. So all great choices. You know. So last question. Do you have any books planned, and can you tell us anything about them? You don't have to, but. You know.
So I have a couple of things planned for next year. Back in the day when I created the Yuricon community, like so many of us, we created the logo and the mascot. And the mascot got, at the time, and we're talking before 2000, a weekly serialized novella. And so I've written the novella out week by week because I wasn't doing anything else at the time, so I was writing. And then she and her lover got a sequel. And those are both online on the Yuricon site, on yuricon.com. But I'm sort of mentally working on a sequel, and if I get that done, then all three will get collected together to a single volume for the first time. So that's one project. The other project I'm working on, and it's still in process, but I'm hoping with a fairly big name in nonfiction about anime and manga to work on a book about some of the women who are really key in manga. There's so many books about the great men of manga, and so we feel like there ought to be a couple of books about the great women of manga. Right. So that's Helen McCarthy and I hope are going to be working on that.
I'm super excited.
I'm super excited too. We'll see if that works out.
This is my favorite part of the interview. But holding up your book, could you give us an unabashed pitch for your book? By Your Side, the first 100 years of anime and manga.
Okay, here we go. By Your Side, the first 100 years of Yuri anime and manga is a first-hand look at the creation and history of one of the newest genres of Japanese pop culture from inside the fandom that created it and made it real.
All right, that's good. That's good. Could you read for us a passage?
This is a passage from an article I wrote to present at the Macadamia Academic Conference on Anime and Manga and Related Media about the names given to the Yuri genre and how we got it to where it is. Because so many people were creating different things and calling it different names, Yuri has gone through a lot of changes over the years, and so this is my summation of when it began to be called Yuri. In 2001, when Yahoo Groups purged the LGBTQ+ focused groups, the I'm a Lesbian group was among them. On November 4th, 2001, I recreated the group and rebranded the mailing list as the Yuricon mailing list. This was the beginning of the use of the word Yuri to describe the genre in the USA. While many fans still used shoujo ai, well into the end of the first decade of the 2000s, I began to shift my usage and communications towards the term Yuri. It still had the connotation of porn in some quarters, but I wanted to reconnect the genre with the term's lesbian roots. Now, I just needed to convince everyone else to join me.
Thank you very much, Erica. We've truly enjoyed learning about your newest work, By Your Side. By Your Side, the first 100 years of Yuri anime and manga is published by Journey Press and is available now. Look for the link in the description box below to get your own copy.